Welcome back. This is episode 145. This podcast is brought to you by Achievement Apex and Power Pit Rockingham, as well as Ped Test Australia and Bulk Gym Chalk. I'm your host, Jacob Harris, and today I'm joined by Emanuel Pescari. I believe I pronounced that correctly, did I?
Yes, very good. Pescari.
Perfect. I have been made aware of Emanuel by Taylor Gone, our last guest on the podcast, and we spoke a lot about strongman, but I'm speaking to one of the strongest men. I have a list here that I'm not going to read out because, to be honest, it probably take me about 5 minutes. If you know anything about Emanuel, you will know that he has lots of experience, many records. I would like to first start off by asking you something I don't know the answer to before we get into all the things I do know, and that is why you are called or referred to as Dr. Death. Can you tell me why that is?
Yeah, thanks. First of all, thanks for the invitation, for having me on, and also shout out and thanks to Tyler for giving you my name, basically. And yeah, that's a funny story because it started. I can't remember exactly when it started. It started like in 2018 or 17 even. No, I think it was 18. I was bored, basically. And I made a lot of funny stories, and I was pretty creative. I went through a lot of crazy stuff in my life back then, through a divorce and many other things changed, so it was quite difficult. And so social media was some kind of escape for me, and therefore I just let my creativity flow. And I was working as a nurse back then, and in my night shifts, basically, I somehow was wearing a mask, was wearing these blue gloves, and I started to make some weird Dr. Death stories, basically, where I just saw them recently again, where I introduced myself. I'm Dr. Death. I'm experimenting right now with something crazy, so and I repeated many stories like that, just for fun, with a mask. It's pretty funny because coincidentally, after 1-2 years later, we had to wear a mask all the time. So yeah. And after, in competition, some people, they saw this, of course, and they started to call me in competitions. Yeah, welcome, Emanuel, Dr. Dev Pescari, and stuff like that. So that's why the name after came and remained, basically.
Interesting. It's a much more pleasant reason than it could have been. There could have been plenty of answers to that. So I like that. It's a good nickname, and I think for me, I've seen a lot of your training now. Generally, when I'm going to speak to someone, I end up kind of binging as much as I can of trying to find out. Mainly, I like the training footage. That's the big thing for me because I'm sort of a nerd for that. As much as it's great to see the feats of strength that you've had and made in competition, that stuff is always the top. I'm actually kind of a little bit of a nerd for the programming stuff and what someone's actually doing in the lead up and all the stuff that's happening in the background. And some of the stuff I've seen you do in the gym is very interesting. And I've noticed that there's a bit of a relation between, I know that you started working with Ranger Strength, and for me, I had recently done a little bit to do with biomechanics, and they're sort of like on different ends of the spectrum where I was a little bit more that way. And so there's a lot to talk about for me because I'm really curious about your approach to the way you train and your mentality around it. And one of the things that I would say it reminded me of very early on, and I wouldn't be surprised if you are a fan of Arthur Saxon, but it reminded me a lot of the stuff I used to see I used to do a podcast where we focused on strong people, and we would pick someone for an episode and we would go over their training. And we did that once. And I spoke, I think, a little bit about this with Taylor, and we were doing bent presses and overhead anyhows, I think they were referred to, or something. And it reminds me a lot of the way that you train. So is there like Is there a big inspiration from the old strongman stuff?
Yeah, so I started with Lucas, so with Range of Strength last year, and I worked with him, I think half a year or something like that. And in that time frame, I was also preparing for official strongman games, World's Strongest Man, in December last year. But next to my prep, I also trained the stuff what he prescribed me and the flexibility and stuff like that. And I also all the content he had made. He has a lot of courses, basically a lot of webinars and stuff. So everything what I could get access to, I just soak it in basically, because I'm a nerd like that too. Everything what is about training and all these modalities and different approaches and stuff like that, I really love and really enjoy learning. And this year, beginning of the year, I guess around February or March, I started to work after with Strongman Archaeology on Instagram, so James Fuller. And he's basically the number one guy to go to if you want to know more about the history of strength sports or weight training. And he is still this guy who's doing like everything like they did 100 years or 150 years or even 200 years ago. And for the moment, I'm working with him. I'm experimenting also a lot by myself, but he's giving me like the programming and the exercises, because I was like, okay, this year I'm not competing, and I said, yeah, we'll use this year to jump straight into all this stuff what you just said, because I really love and enjoy also the history, and especially the beginning, like with Arthur Saxon, Eugene Sandow, George Hackenschmidt, and all the greats from back then, and even towards the silver era and stuff. And I was like, yeah, because I want to learn, let's go to James, let's have a chat with him. And I'm speaking also quite frequently with him, because I'm asking him about the history and I'm asking him about things and stuff, and also his approach, of course. And yeah, that's how I jumped into all this stuff, and he's basically using all the things from the past, but also, of course, newer exercises, basically.
Yeah, well, I imagine we've learned a little bit since then, so we might be able to look at some of the old stuff and say, hey, maybe certain things aren't ideal. I definitely remember trying some things that day that left me feeling a little bit sore a couple of days after. But it was interesting. It's crazy to see how we had to train at one point. It wasn't necessarily that we were doing that by choice. So it's good to know that there's people that are working with it so specifically that they've obviously advanced it to different ways of training. And I've seen that in the way you train, even just your focus on things like rotation and stuff, I find really interesting, because I work around, or, I've spoken to a lot of bodybuilders, and it's like the last thing you're going to see in one of those guys' programs, there's no rotation. This podcast is sponsored by Achievement Apex. Achievement Apex creates some of the best barbells in the world, and they supply some of these barbells to some of the strongest powerlifters and athletes in the world. If you want an Achievement Apex barbell, you can go to achievementapex.com and use the code PORTAPOTTY for 10% off any order that you make.
And it's funny, because if you're looking like into the golden era and to like Arnold Schwarzenegger, everyone knows his popular pose where he's like standing with his hips looking forward, but he's turning completely to the right side, and he's like really perpendicular to his hips, basically, and he's making a double bicep pose, so that amount of rotation to gain is like huge, and most of the people nowadays, they can't even, what I like always to think and to give as an example for rotation is, just think about, it's really stupid, but just think about when you're going to the toilet and you have to swipe your back, Yeah, so when you're done on the toilet, that's rotation, and for some people it's like really hard to access and to get there, but if you are training rotation, or if you are learning to rotate, it makes life so easy, and especially like in bodybuilding, where you saw he had also a lot of ballet or ballet training, where they're also training to move like freely. I think for bodybuilder, this would be maybe not to the extent in which I am training, or what my focus is with getting a lot of strength there, but certainly for getting access to more range of motion in rotation.
Yeah, I think as well it goes across more than, as you said, a really good point you made was it goes further than training. As you said, even just posing, you would think that that would be a focus, and I do think that maybe with some of the newer people are putting more emphasis on stretching. At least some of the people I'm around, and just like trying to be in better ranges. But it's, if you were to say walk into, I'm not sure what it's like in Austria, but you walk into a lot of gyms and there's, you don't see people doing that. And it's probably because we have less knowledge around it. People are generally scared to do that sort of thing. They maybe think, oh, I'm going to hurt my back, stuff like that, where they don't realize that maybe in certain cases they're hurting their back because they're not doing those sorts of things. They're not training that way. So I'm curious because from if I've got the timeline right, you did Ninja Warrior, and was it 2022?
It was 2021.
2021?
Yeah.
And that's like very different again, especially from strongman. But I mean, I would imagine there would be a lot of rotation involved in that sort of situation, depending on some of the movements that you're doing. There's a lot of overhead work, but maybe in a different way than it would be in strongman. Rather than pressing, there's lots of pulling and things like this. So I'm curious as to how you found that. Like, you were obviously doing some weight training before then and then decided to do Ninja Warrior. Like, how did that come about?
That's also a funny story, because I saw an ad, but I can't remember exactly where I saw it. It was on YouTube or on Insta. Somewhere I saw an ad about Ninja Warrior, and that they want to make a second season or a third season in. No, now I remember. Yeah, exactly. The first time when they did the Ninja Warrior, I saw it too late. I tried to register. I registered, but it was too late for them to accept me, and that was in 2017, 2018, something again around that area. That's the time frame where basically everything started. Started strong in 2017, and my life got completely changed there. So it's funny how everything goes back there. But yeah, so I got registered there, but it was too late, so they closed the registration basically, and I was still in their email. So they still had my email, and when they started the next season, I think it was in 2020. They started to collect people again, to make the exams and the tests and the introduction and stuff. They wrote me and they asked me if I want to participate, and I was like, yeah, of course, why not? I wanted to try it anyway, and I'm coming from a background where I was like into really many different sports, and especially this kind of like some calisthenics, athleticism type of thing. And yeah, then I introduced myself to them. They accepted me. I had to make a test. They accepted me, and after we came to this later, a few months later, we came to this Ninja Warrior parkour where I prepared for that as well, which was kind of fun to prep for.
Yeah, so you had like a facility near you that was set up similar, or did you have to kind of make it work at the gym sort of thing?
No, so I'm training at home, and I had to, because with Ninja Warrior, it's like if you don't have any access to any parkour type of thing, first go, first try. It's basically, So when you are there at Ninja Warrior at this parkour, you are going through the parkour, and they're explaining to you, and someone is making a run, but you are not allowed to make the run. So your first run there is also your last run, basically. And I was like, okay, I took all the things from the past, which I just saw a few things and how the parkour looks like. And I was like, okay, I will just implement these things into my training, and then I will improvise them at home somehow. And that's what I did after, with rings, swinging on the rings around like a monkey, basically, or these monkey hangs, how they're called, jumping from one bar to another on my power rack to the squat rack, and making hurdles on the ground, making like things where I have to balance on and to run fast and to jump, and many such things besides my actual training, which I also still did.
Yeah, it seems like it would be a really difficult thing to train for, because you've got so many different aspects of it, and it's kind of hard, as you know, to be really good at everything, right? If we're talking about jumping, rotating, hanging, like they're all things, and then you probably still would have been doing normal training at the same time. So I find that interesting, as well as I noticed some of the things with your training, and I've heard you talk about your deadlift before and how you've struggled when it comes to strength with your deadlift. But then at the same time, as far as I know, the record you hold for the Atlas Stone is like 215, but you've done 220 in the gym.
Yeah.
And so I'm sort of, it's like, it's that kind of part of me again. I've been a personal trainer for about 9 years. And so like, I've always had all these different outlooks and learning that I'm happening. And I'm like, that's crazy to me that someone, the Atlas Stone, it's like that is stronger for you than a deadlift, where I feel like a deadlift is giving you more advantage. An Atlas Stone is by far much more awkward, but you seem to be stronger at that. And I'm like, I find that interesting because of the way you train. It's almost like you were, maybe not everyone can bend their spine and train different ways, but it's almost like for you, it's almost like you operate better at that. Like your spine is stronger when you're bending it, and it seems to be almost like your body prefers to lift that way. So is there a level of comfort for you that is like that? Like, is it almost like that's when you feel not awkward? Does it feel maybe less comfortable for you to try and like straighten everything out and keep your spine neutral?
Yeah. So when you're putting it like that, it's like you're hitting the point, actually, and it's quite funny. And I'm coming from a pretty strict side as well. So I learned, and still I'm also a lecturer at the personal trainer academy, where I'm educating new personal trainers and fitness trainers and new trainers, basically. And in our curriculum still says, yeah, you have to keep a neutral spine. You have even to retract your shoulders, I think. And if you're looking at a deadlift, that's like not the position you want to be in, because you're just making everything, you're increasing the range of motion, and you are in such an unstable position, which...
This podcast is sponsored by Power Pit Rockingham, and Power Pit Rockingham is probably the best gym for you to train in if you are in Rockingham and want access to quality powerlifting equipment and a good environment to train in when it comes to powerlifting training or bodybuilding training. If you are in the area and want to do so, pop on down to Power Pit Rockingham, jump in for a casual session, and tell them that the Porta Potty sent you.
After a while, or to a certain point, you can hold it muscularly, but after, you won't be able to hold that position because the weights and the load is just too high, and you are just mechanically in a disadvantaged position. And for me, I at the beginning, I was like fixated to keep my spine straight on a deadlift, and to even work around with, okay, where has to be the bar placement? The bar placement should be midfoot, or even your shins should touch the bar when you're going into the lift off position. And for me, that just didn't work well, So of course, I hit the 300 kg and even more than that. But to progress it further was like really difficult, and honestly, it just felt really shit to say like that. It was like it didn't feel great at all, and it didn't feel strong. And it was always like, I don't want to deadlift back then. Every time when deadlifts came up, I was like, I don't want to deadlift. I really don't enjoy it. I really don't like it anymore. And after many tries and many experiments, and even listening more to my body, I was like, okay, let's see. Get into this position, roll the bar a bit further away, so not completely mid-foot, but a bit farther in front, so like 1 centimeter or something like that. Don't touch the shins to the bar. Round a bit with your back. Maybe not the lower portion of the lower back, because for me it's like your hips still should be in an anterior tilted pelvic position to like lengthen the hamstrings and to get a lot of or enough tension on the hamstrings and the glutes. That's why I'm still looking to keep there an anterior pelvic tilt. But towards the thoracic spine, it's like popular, quote unquote. It's when you're looking at the best deadlifters, and many others, they have like a huge rounded thoracic spine, which just decreases the leverage of the weight basically, and is more an advantageous position for you. So I embraced all these things, and I was like, now this feels great, you know. And also I was thinking further and looking at my training, looking at strongman, looking in the past. I was like, why should I be that strict with a deadlift when I'm bending down, when I'm like moving how I can, the most awkward objects? Why can't I be there, or shouldn't I be there as strict as possible? But on a deadlift, I should be as strict as possible. It doesn't make any sense really. And for me, I was always stronger, like in picking up stones, like you said, or sandbags, or any other type of objects, like even a log or something like that. Because it just allows for a more natural and quote unquote comfortable position for you, in which, if you are used and trained to, you can create or generate a lot of force and strength basically.
Yeah, I like that you spoke about hip extension then. That's a big one, because I feel that's where maybe it's been lost with me when I've seen people do it sometimes and they lose that. The fact that you're obviously knowledgeable and know what you're doing, but there's a lot of people that are quite strong that maybe don't put as much of a focus on those certain things. And that's when I can get a little bit like, I question it more, I think, look, this person's really strong, but surely we can't ignore those fundamentals to an extent, right? Like you said, thoracic, I feel like we're coming as an industry, we seem to be moving in the right direction when it comes to physiology. And we're understanding that, like, I mean, if I was around anyone in a room ever and someone told someone to retract their shoulder blades while they would deadlift, maybe I wouldn't, disrespect that person in front of everyone. But I might pull them aside and say, "Are you sure we want to teach people that? Because that's a little bit outdated." But the thing that you mentioned about hip extension is huge, because when I have seen people do it and they have lost that, that's where it loses me. And I kind of go, look, I'm all for rounding the spine a bit, but if you lose that, I mean, surely that's a very weak position to be in. I don't think it matters how strong you are. You everyone's going to benefit from having performing hip extension correctly and having the involvement of those muscles, because obviously we know how strong they are. So that's an interesting way you've put it, and I've never really heard someone put it that way.
Usually, so this is one thing what many people don't understand. There is this glenohumeral rhythm. How your upper arm moves with your shoulder blade, and you have the same rhythm with your pelvis. It's the lumbar-pelvic rhythm basically. So your lumbar spine and your pelvis should move in a certain rhythm. So basically, every time when you're leaning forward and you're bending down, you should go into an anterior pelvic tilt. because that's when you access the hamstrings properly, and you can like really stretch them also a lot, you know. Many people, when they're bending down to touch their toes, for example, or to pick something up with straight legs, they don't have this lumbopelvic rhythm, they don't have this awareness anymore, and they tilt it backwards, basically, you know. And by tilting backwards, you're restricting the your access to the hamstrings, and you are limited after by the joints you have, you know. So you can't reach any further down because your spine just can't can bend that much, you know. But by tilting, this needs time, of course, and this needs training because your hamstrings won't be that long. But if you are getting into an anterior pelvic tilt, this allows your spine to sounds funny, but to elongate, you know, to align in a better position to reach forward. That's when you're getting this nice pike shape. When you're like googling or looking for someone who's doing a pike stretch, or who's like really touching palms to floor, for example, they have like the legs are completely straight, and after they have this really nice pike position, or this um, pyramid type of corner, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you don't have
As
access to this lumbopelvic rhythm, you won't be able to get into that shape.
Yeah, so you're saying as opposed to like just excessive lumbar flexion, where it's just like
Yeah, because
really, yeah,
if you have this lumbar flexion, if you have this posterior pelvic tilt, you get this fishing rope type of position, you know, where you are getting round, but not like peak rounded and narrow rounded, but you're getting this wide round, you know, which is not a good position to get in, because you're after just not stacked well, you know, and you can't access your hamstrings and your glutes to elongate, you know, and to stretch them properly.
I'm interested in what you would think about something like a Jefferson curl then.
For me, a Jefferson curl is, I like Jefferson curls, you know. I was introduced to Jefferson curls also quite early, and how should I say it? I wouldn't consider them to really build strength, you know, or to not like that, to use heavy weights with it, but like to work on basic flexibility, and to like lengthen the hamstrings and even hit the hamstrings more than like with other things at the beginning. I think it's good, and also to just help people get better mobility, especially for spinal flexion, you know. And you can also really hit your spinal erectors really well with Jefferson curls.
Yeah, I can see it from that point of view. I'm curious though, because you would still in a Jefferson curl, and where the way I've seen them done fairly conventionally, there is a lot of lumbar flexion. That it's sort of, so is that sort of why is that sort of what you mean by that's why you wouldn't train them in the same way?
No, because that's what you're seeing. It sounds funny, but that's wrong most of the time, because people can't access the anterior pelvic tilt, you know, because they are just either not aware of how to use their pelvis, or their hamstrings, or most of the time is the hamstrings. The hamstrings are too tight, basically, you know, and they can't. Because if, for everyone listening, you know, you can try that. Just stand up, you know, put your feet like hip width, and try with straight legs to touch the floor. If you can touch the floor, stay in that position and try to anterior tilt your pelvis even more. And if you can do that, and if you have this awareness of accessing your joint position of your pelvis, you will feel, okay, the more you tilt forward, the more intense the stretch in the hamstrings will get, you know. So this is a basic test which you can do, and most of the people, like I said before, they are losing somewhere the connection to get into this lumbopelvic rhythm, and that's why the Jefferson curl doesn't look that nice after, you know. For some, okay, like I said, it's a lot of awareness, it's a lot of maybe at the beginning some restriction because they just don't have the length yet. But a Jefferson curl can teach that quite well.
Yeah, I have seen different. I've definitely seen some different techniques with it, and I know what you're saying, and it's a range that I would like to be able to have one day. I mean, I've definitely always dealt with like really tight hamstrings, and really. I mean, it's probably super common anyway, but for me, I definitely like even doing a back extension I will feel my hamstrings, I would say, more than I should, right? It's not, I shouldn't feel generally with that. I don't want them to be the thing that I can feel the most because I'm not really trying to target that usually with a back extension, but we can do that. But I find it interesting. Yeah, I find the training side of things really interesting, man. I definitely want to touch more on that, but I want to kind of go into some of the training because I'm curious about some of the other feats of strength that you would want to maybe work on or you want to work with in the future in terms of movements, because the movements I have here so far that you've already done a lot with, we'd mentioned your Atlas Stone, which is obviously very strong. Probably the one that is actually intriguing me the most is you've got a lot here. You've got a 320 raw deadlift. I know you did 350 in competition. You've 190 kilo log lift. Like there's some strong lifts in here, but what actually is intriguing me the most is the 270 kilos times 10 on a raw squat. That's what I found anyway. So is that how did you perform that? Was it knee sleeves? Was it high bar? This podcast is sponsored by PedTest Australia. If you plan on using or are currently using performance-enhancing drugs, it is very important that you make sure you are doing so, having them been tested before you use them or while you are using them to make sure that you take care of your health, and you can also recommend that the people around you do so as well. Go to PedTest Australia on Instagram to find out more about the details on how you can test your current performance-enhancing drugs that you are using, or you can find out more about testing other compounds or things that you are putting in your body if you would like to make sure that you take care of your health.
Yeah, that was in 2022 at Austria's Strongest Man. And the first event was axle back squats. And I think we had 230 or 270 for reps. And it was raw, but with reps. And so this was a strongman style squats. So you went down until parallel approximately, had to touch the boxes with the wagon wheels, what we had there, and just perform as many reps as you can in like 60 seconds. And yeah, I think someone did, or the most until it was my turn. We were 8 reps, so I knew, okay, I have to go to 10 reps to like secure a really good spot. And that's what I did. I think I could have done 1 or 2 more reps, but yeah, strongman is also some kind of show. So in the middle, somewhere around the 8th or 9th rep, I took out my brace and I screamed just for fun, and I had to brace again after I was already a bit exhausted. I did the last rep, and after I ditched the bar, and it was like, okay, 10 is enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, is that the year because you've won Austria's Strongest Man, and was that the year that
Yeah,
you won?
the first year, yeah.
Yeah, and then
Because I won last year too.
Yeah, so you've won 2 now. So you won last year and the year before.
Yeah.
So when were the European championship? Because
this
you won
was
that as well.
last year.
Oh, that was last year as well. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. And so then I had one that I was unsure about, and I don't know if it was written wrong, but it says Ultimate World Champion under 105s.
Yeah.
Is that separate
Yeah.
from Strongman?
Yeah, so that's so you have OSG, Official Strongman Games, which is I think perhaps the biggest federation, strongman federation worldwide, and after that you have Ultimate Strongman. And Ultimate Strongman is another federation. The big guys are mostly in UK, and it's led by Glenn Ross. Maybe some of your listeners will know him. And the U105s, or all the weight categories basically, and even the woman categories, are, the president is Valery Gazeev, and he's always organizing since 2016, I think, the World Championship for U105s, and it's getting each year bigger and bigger. And I first competed there in 2018, and since then I was there at every competition. And 2022 and last year 2023 I won both of them. So in 22 it was in Paris, and last year it was in Fulda in Germany.
And then were you dealing with an injury after? Was that after the last one?
My last injury, that was last year. So that's when I broke the European record, because I wanted to go for the world record on the stone. But on the competition there, where I wanted to break that, they had some issues and some problems. So between my attempt from 215 and 230, there was like a half an hour gap in between, and I was standing all the time in the sun, running in circles, 30, 35 degrees of heat, and I was sweating all the time. And until I got finally to the stone to do my attempt, I didn't warm up. I didn't do anything. I tried it a few times, couldn't get a nice grip, because my tacky was also running off and my sleeves were not holding anymore because of sweat, etc. And after, when I said, okay, I'm trying once more, I got a grip on, tried to lift the stone, and when I lifted it, I felt both hamstrings, how they popped. The right one a bit more than the left one, and so I partially tore both of them. And that was 6 weeks out of Europe's Strongest Man.
That's rough. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so I must have gotten that mixed up with when you did your pec. When did you do the pec?
This is so the left one, the bigger one, was in 2020, I think. And last year I tore slightly the right one, but not more so because it fell something on it. So I cleaned the dumbbell. I cleaned the dumbbell, and the edge of the dumbbell went directly here into my pec. The dumbbell was 130 kilo or something like that, so that slightly hurt me.
Yeah, it doesn't sound comfortable. Is this the one? Is this the one where I saw that you were doing the rehab for, like the slow eccentric bench and stuff? Was that for the right pec?
Yeah, it was for the recent one.
Yeah, okay. And how did you find that rehab helped in terms of like a turnaround? Like, what would you say that a lot of what you were doing, and because there was that as well as the chaos pressing, I saw that you were doing and stuff like that as well. And I think for a lot of people that comes across as like a lot of novelty stuff. Like, it's people do a lot of things, and sometimes when you're running 2 or 3 different variations, it might be a little bit difficult from a perspective of analytics to actually work out, okay, what specifically do I feel like was contributing, to this rehab? Is there something that you felt like really carried over, and something that, like, say for instance, if you were in that position again, you would definitely 100% replicate?
Yeah, so the chaos training definitely was one, and what I also like always is like the banded high rep method, basically. So reason being is with the bands and with the high reps, you are getting a lot of blood flow, but really a lot of blood flow into the injured area, and most of the time you can still fully shorten the muscle, but not fully lengthen the muscle. So a band, like for pec flies, what I used it is advantageous, because in a contracted position you have a lot of resistance here, but the wider you open your arms, the lighter the resistance gets. It depends how you are setting up the bands, and most of the time the more risky or injurious part of a muscle is the lengthened position. So that's why you don't want to have too much tension in the lengthened position, especially in a really early stage of rehab. So that's why the banded reps and high reps for high blood flow is a good option and really helped a lot. And the chaos training is again something where you can kinda measurably increase or aim for progressive overload, so to still use heavier weights with time, but you are constrained because of the chaos of the bands and the swinging and everything, you know. So you can't use like, um, let's say, what you're. I was when I got hurt, I was benching a close grip for 4 or 5 reps with 175 kg, and when I did after the chaos press, I was just around between 60 and 100 kg. I think I went up to 100 kg, which was okay, you know. So it was quite a lot of chaos and instability, but because of that, I could really focus on getting a lot of force production as in this constraint as I could. And this is for me another aim which I'm looking for. First one is getting a lot of blood flow in. Second one is to still be able to generate a lot of force. And third one is to get to range, full range of motion again. You know, there sometimes I'm using also some kind of loaded stretching protocols, maybe with lighter weights, but I'm like really trying to get into as much stretch as I can and just trying to stay there, like basically isometrically or in an eccentric fashion where I'm just going slowly down and try to go with each rep a bit further into the range or into a newer range after the injury, basically.
Yeah, I find it interesting now that you've explained it that way. I can see why the bands, because I obviously remember seeing them, and because of the way that you'd positioned the bands each side of you, obviously, as you said, as you opened your arms, you lost a lot of resistance. Where anyone would know if they've done, say, a dumbbell fly or a cable fly, probably more so the dumbbell fly. That position, given that you create a larger moment arm as the dumbbells get away from you, that's where you're in more trouble. So that makes a lot of sense. And I've not done any pec rehab myself, so that's actually been valuable for me to learn. And I like that it's made me think about it differently and understand how that the loading it differently is really important, and that makes a lot of that makes a lot of sense. I guess that's where I mentioned before, like, with all the stuff that you've done here, so the axle press and the Atlas stone and stuff, you've obviously hit a lot of these, I guess, whatever you want to maybe call them, like they're feats of strength, but maybe goals for you as well. We all kind of have stuff in our head. Maybe the 300 kilo deadlift at first, you were like, I want to hit that number and things like that. Is there something that's maybe not on the list so far that you've done that you're maybe working towards now or in the future you would want to work towards, that's maybe a feat of strength in either strongman or just something in the gym that you're kind of working on? Like, obviously we all have bench press as a common one, but I feel like with you, there must be an unconventional lift that we're going to see you maybe PR on in the future.
So one, of course, is as a former log press world record holder. So of course, a new log record. One goal of mine, and of course, the ultimate goal would be 200 kg on a log lift. And I do have some other goals in mind. Like, for example, I think one unknown one would be the one-hand snatch. The one-hand snatch is set by Charles Rigolo. My wife is French, and every time when I'm speaking about him or when I'm speaking about him and I'm pronouncing his name, she's always like, "No, this is wrong how you're spelling it." So that's why I'm always thinking now, Rigolo. Anyway, yeah. So he set the world record in 1915 or 1920, some 1920. So it's over 100 years now. The world record, which is still unbroken, and it's 115 kilograms with a one-hand snatch with a barbell. Um, I forgot his name now. One strongman tried it a couple of years ago, 7 or 8 years ago.
I think I might have this wrong, but I'm pretty sure was Chris Duffin doing it for a bit. You know,
Mm,
are you familiar with Chris Duffin? I think he was trying them
yeah,
for a little bit. I'm maybe not taking it seriously, but I think that's the only other time I've seen it because you're referring to with a barbell, aren't you?
yeah, exactly. Where you're grabbing the
Yeah.
barbell in the middle and you're
Mm.
just snatching it in one way overhead.
Power
Um,
snatch.
yeah, basically.
Mm.
And although Charles did it differently because he like pulled it, and as he pulled it, he jumped right underneath and he catched it in a deep squat again with a full rotated. Because this is the nice thing about Charles's technique. And if you've seen one of my recent trainings, what I'm doing right now, I'm doing a suitcase snatch, so where suitcase deadlift is something you're familiar with, I guess.
I think if it's the what I'm thinking of, it might be, but educate me
So
anyway.
so basically, you have a deadlift, you have the bar in front of you. So now, when you're in the middle of the bar, you are stepping to be parallel with the bar. So you're facing one side of the plates, and you're
Hmm.
grabbing with one hand down in the middle of the bar, and you're standing up. That's basically a suitcase deadlift. So I'm doing now a suitcase snatch, so the same position, but I'm snatching the bar overhead. And this is the end position which Charles had back then, and he was also in a full deep squat. To be able to hold the bar overhead in the full deep squat position, you have to like fully rotate your torso, your upper body, to like be really well stacked to be able to hold the weight overhead. And after that, he stood up with the weight, and yeah.
I'm curious about that. That's really so suitcase deadlifts I'm familiar with. I've seen carries were a big thing. I remember
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of carries. I have so many questions about that. So if you're doing a suitcase carry or a deadlift, you're all right. We're getting the big words out now. I'm speaking to someone who's a nerd, so hopefully I can get it right, or you can tell me if I get it wrong. You a suitcase carry or a suitcase deadlift, you would be resisting lateral flexion. No.
Yeah, exactly. It would
Yeah.
be
Yes.
anti-lateral flexion. Yes, yes.
Yeah. Anti-lateral flexion. So we've got that part right. I'm blown away by what you've said though. If you're doing it from that position, you're going straight from the side, completely out to the side. Are you staying feet forward
Yes.
when you?
Yes.
So wouldn't that prohibit you from performing like triple extension? Like would you not be able to not generate much force because you're going completely from the side, and it would just a lot of that would fall onto your shoulder, would it not?
Mm, depends. It depends how much, because this is the funny thing. You have here a mixture between an anti-lateral flexion movement and to some extent rotation, because with this or in this deadlift position, every time when you have a one hand, depends where you are, but still your hips are farther behind than where your hand is, so you have there's some kind of lever, and this pulls your upper body into slight rotation, so there you have also some, not only lateral anti-lateral flexion, but also anti-rotation component. So you have to be able to be really strong and stable in these anti-movements, to be able to generate a lot of force and to put a lot of force into the barbell to propel it overhead. But then overhead, you want the completely opposite, because you are still staying facing forward one side of the plate and or of the barbell, and you have now to slightly to rotate a lot, and also to bend forward, because you want to stack. This is difficult to imagine, but you want to stack your joints one above the other one, to not fully hold the weight or the barbell muscularly, but with your skeletal structure, basically. Everyone knows how to stack their joints. This is also what you can do when you're rotating and when you're in such a position. You just have to know, okay, how do I stack my wrist, my elbow, my shoulder over my shoulder girdle? How do I rotate enough so I'm stacked in with my rotation as well and with all the muscles holding me there? And where is my proper stance where I can generate a lot of force with? Makes sense?
This podcast is sponsored by Bulk Gym Chalk. Do you struggle to hold onto your deadlifts? If so, it can be very important to make sure that you have good quality chalk and access to that chalk. So go to Bulk Gym Chalk. You can find them on Instagram and get yourself some good quality chalk so that you can make sure that you can train in the gym and get the best out of your training while doing so. Yeah. So is your position of your feet changing much at all, or are you just performing a lot of trunk rotation?
No, you're just performing a lot of trunk rotation. Of course, because you are getting into perhaps not a fully, but almost a full triple extension, because when you're accelerating, you have to like really put a lot of force, like I said, into the bar, and so you are like basically jumping, but I guess you're not fully extending your hips, but definitely your ankles and your knees. Your hips maybe not, because you are still in a slight forward leaned position, and you're rotating more rather than extending. Yeah, but
Yeah,
you're still
I'm
keeping.
I'm imagining it like now, and it seems I almost want to try it. I could go out into the gym after this and try it, but no one's here, so I might wait till people are in case I hurt myself. That walk in the morning and find a barbell on the floor, and I will be knocked out because I've dropped it on myself or something.
I,
It sounds
I
interesting.
I can send you a video after.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like for this, I'm going to want to be able to chuck a video on there because people are going to be like, I'm trying to imagine that. And like you said, it's difficult to imagine. I have a question about there's like a lot of people out there that you've obviously started working with, the range guys and like a few other people that you've spoken about before. A question I like to ask people, I'm always curious about, and it's funny too, because you are in Austria. So people always give me the same answer. If I say, who would you train with if you could train with anyone? What answer do you reckon I get the most when I say to people, he's a bodybuilder?
Arnold?
Yeah, every
Oh,
time.
really?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, I speak to a lot of bodybuilders, right? And hey, who wouldn't want to train with Arnold? It'd be cool. But I feel like you might have a different, like a pretty interesting answer, right? Because the thing that I like to say to people as well is I don't like to put a limit on it. Like if this person can be alive or dead, you know what I mean? They don't have to. It could be someone from the past. Is there anyone that you would, if you could be in the gym with for a session, that you'd like to learn from?
So if it would be either Arthur Saxon or Charles Rigolo. One of them.
What if you
If
could choose
if
a
it's
lift?
if it's to be alive, I would go, I think, with James Fuller. Yeah. Many
Okay.
people don't know him, but he is a strongman archaeology, and he like really, yeah, is all into this old time stuff. And I'm just a unconventional guy, basically, so I really love all this type of things. Other than that, I don't know. I'm I think different than most of the people you're talking to.
Yeah, I think it's more just a lot of people just, I don't know, they think that training with Arnold would be cool, I guess, right? It'd be cool. He's a very well known person, things like that, And there's other answers, but I feel like those people, especially if you're talking Arthur Saxon, I feel like that would be the experience. You're training with someone from
Yeah.
a different time. I feel like it would be a different, more unique experience. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about is you cut down. I don't know if I heard it right. Did you cut down from you were like 106 kilos and you went down to 82s?
Yeah, so when I first started training, I was 16 years old. I was 106 kilo in body weight.
At
um,
16.
yeah, but I wasn't muscular, of course. So it was all dead weight, basically. It's funny because I remember one of the like striking moments I had in my mind from that area. I was in school and we had to run. I think it was a Cooper test or something like that. So that's basically where you're running. There are two different versions of this, but one version, which I had a lot in the army after, was 2.4 kilometers. You should run in under 12 and a half minutes. And the other type of Cooper test is you have 12 and a half minutes or something like that, and you are running as far as you can, you know, and you have after a certain table or a spreadsheet, whatever, where you are seeing, okay, the times and the distance and stuff. And I remember we had to do this kind of Cooper test of running, and I wasn't even able to run 1 kilometer without dying. You know, I think I came as 800 meters, and after I had to lay already down, I couldn't breathe anymore, and yeah, it was just KO. And that was one moment where I was like, no, this can't continue like that. And it sounds crazy right now, but I lost in 2.5 months 25 kilograms, and I went from 106 to 82 kilograms. Yeah, something like that.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine that wouldn't have been fun at the time. But I mean, it's 106 kilos at 16, man. That is it? It must be there's a great place here in a place called Fremantle here, and they are a hot dog place, and they do like German bratwurst sausages there,
Okay.
and I mean, I'm sure they're not as good as back home, but they're good here. I can imagine if the food's like that back home, I probably would have been 100 kilos at 16 as well. Do you have like is there like I'm always curious as to like what someone eats regularly, like not what they eat every day, not full day of eating, but just something. Everyone has like a food they're kind of addicted to. I definitely have mine. Is there something that's like a staple in your diet that you just love? Maybe Germany, the food's different. I'm curious.
No, not really. We have it's funny because me and my wife, we have like phases where we are eating for a phase like a lot of what we have here in general in Austria and in Germany is Topfen or Quark, it's called, and this is some kind of dairy of not cottage cheese. It's almost like cottage cheese, but it's a bit harder. It's a bit like how should I say, like hard yogurt, you know, which you can spoon out, and it has a lot of protein and less or not many. There is a fatter version, so you have a fatter version, but you have also a fat reduced version. And if you're taking the fat reduced version, it's like insanely just protein rich. And we have like phases where we're eating a lot of that, or after we have phases we're eating a lot of meat, you know, so it's different. But I think at the moment, what's really a staple of mine is apples. I'm eating like always every day around 1 to 5 apples, somewhere in between those lines.
Okay, that's almost a bit funny because there's a saying that I'm assuming that it's universal and you hear it over there, but that an apple a day keeps the
Yeah.
doctor away, and then your doctor death. So I think that's actually kind of funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like
Funny,
it.
yeah.
I quite often ask specifically about like what maybe someone's favorite moment was or has been so far. Like I said, the list that I had it was extremely extensive. You know, you did a team competition, Germany versus Austria or
Mhm.
something that I found, which is was there two of you? Was it like 2 versus 2 or was it like a big group?
W- There are there are a few team competitions which I did already, but in the past, at the beginning, we had like Austria versus Germany, where we were 4 versus 4. So the four strongest people from Austria versus the 4 strongest people from Germany. Then I also had like mixed team competition where I was like with a strong woman. After we had like also Austria versus Hungary, again with 4 people. We have also like what Ultimate Strongman. There's also World's Strongest Nation in the U105. So you have a team up to 4 people with 1 in reserve, and you are competing against, like now this year was, I think there were 8 nations here in Germany. So it was quite a big competition. Last year was, I think, the same. Again, something like that. So there are many team competitions which I did already and which are quite fun.
Yeah, I find it interesting. That's why I was kind of curious as to, like, out of everything that you've done, like, is there one that maybe not, because obviously there's different levels of maybe how prestigious certain things are. Like, obviously you've got, European strongman, and then you've got the Austria's strongest man and stuff like that. But is there one that you found the most enjoyable? Is there a competition where you enjoyed the competition and the exercise choice that they had and things like that the most? Do you need to be hydrated? If so, you can do so with some Thirst Trap. This podcast is sponsored by Thirst Trap, and we are hydrating constantly on this podcast with Thirst Trap. You should have some Thirst Trap.
I think it's difficult to say because there are Europe's Strongest Man last year was quite nice, although we didn't have stones, but we had quite nice events like with the power stairs and the sandbag steeplechase. And something else. Austria Strongest Man last year was also nice, but it was a standard competition. But the weights were quite heavy, so this was fun. Other than that,
is there one for the future that you haven't, and that you're set on? Because I mean, from the information I have is you were born in 1990. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Which is mind blowing to me, because I'm not saying that you look old, but you're 5 years older than me, and it makes me feel like I need to do more with my life, because the amount of competitions that you've done and what you're doing is mind blowing. So you're only 5 years older than me. That's wild. What's the plan? I mean, I'm assuming you're going to compete for quite a lot longer.
Yeah. So last year I came second at World's Strongest Man at OSG in America, and that's because I was, I know it's mostly my fault because I was kind of sick, and that's why I took also this year off to get rid of this problem what I have, which kept me a bit back. And that's certainly something I want to go to gain, because I know that's my title. Sounds maybe cocky, but I know I have the strength. I know I have the abilities. I know I can do that, and I certainly want to have the title. And yeah, for next year, I think I will do Ultimate Strongman World Championship perhaps again. 3 would be nice to have. Europe's and Worlds from OSG, so Europe's Strongest Man and World's Strongest Man I will do, because my spots are reserved. They should have been for this year, but I asked the organizer if he can switch them to next year, and he was so kind to do that and to accept it. So I will compete there, and I don't know if I will do any other competitions. I will see. But now focus is learning, I guess, learning a lot about the history, a lot about all the crazy and unconventional strength movements from the past and what is also possible today. Embrace new ranges and new movements, you know, and certainly also pushing up the business. So I'm currently working a lot on my business to push it to new heights. I'm focusing a lot also on a German speaking country because we are here. How should I say? It's like always everything in the West, especially sports wise, it takes like years, if not even longer, like a decade or so, until things are coming finally to Germany and Austria, and I just wanted to bring a bit more awareness to everything, and also to, it sounds funny, but to bring the people back to the roots, because a lot of strongmen from the past, like even Arthur Saxon, he was German. So many from the beginning, they were either German or Austrian or French people, or like George Hackenschmidt, the Lithuanian. So many are coming actually from Europe, from Middle Europe, and the back then it was also like the continental lifters and the clean lifters, or the English lifters, basically. There were these two separate groups. But yeah, that's what I'm focusing now on.
Do you think, you did Ninja Warrior? Would you see yourself doing something else, like not involving strongman, just in the future, like the Highland Games or something like that, as just something different? If
I
you were
don't
maybe
know.
offered?
I don't know. Perhaps, but I really do enjoy the strongman type of sport. It's a mixture between like heavyweights, many funny uh, events and exercises, or however you want to call it. And it just makes a lot of fun. It has some type. It's not like CrossFit type where you have a lot of endurance, but you still have a bit of endurance training as well too in there. And of course, if you want to be healthy, if you want to function well, if you want to perform well, you need also some type of cardio training and to focus a bit on endurance. So for me, strongman like really brings everything together. And mm, I don't know if I will go to something else, maybe to something athletic, but like a Ninja Warrior would be interesting, and I would do it potentially once again. But for that, I will have to like really diet again, because in 2021, I had to diet down to like 91 kilo, or 92. So I was like really lean, really shredded, because my aim was to be as light as possible. Because I knew, okay, if I'm heavy, I won't be able to have a strong grip, and I won't be able to be as agile as I could be, and to be as springy and all this stuff. And yeah, I'm running now around with like 15 kilos more. So I'm around 106, 107, 108.
Don't want to give up the apples either.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like it, man. Look, it's been really interesting talking to you. I find it really interesting the way that you train, and I'm really excited to see what you do in the future as well. And just to be honest, I'm just excited to follow you. Like I said, I was made aware of you. Now I can follow you on Instagram and see some of the training stuff that you do. I find a lot of it really interesting, and it makes me think differently. And as a person, but I mean, especially as a personal trainer, I think there's nothing more important than constantly having or I guess kind of beliefs, or the way you look at things challenged and thrown into different areas to look at things a different way. It's super helpful. And yeah, it's intriguing. It's what makes me continue to love training and want to teach others to train, because if it was all just every single person does everything the same way, it'd be very boring.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And then the good thing about the body is, the body adapts to any kind of stimulus, and if it's enough, stimulus has to be to reach a certain threshold. But that's the great thing, with the body. The body basically adapts to everything. Like Even if you're doing like now a Jefferson curl, or you're bending over to pick up a stone or a sandbag or whatever, you will adapt to it. You just need to give it the right amount of stimulus at a time.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, that's hopefully what people can take away then, if you're listening to this podcast and you've heard that, that's something to take away from it. I know that it's something that I will, because there's definitely a way that you can get into thinking where you stick to a certain way of doing something and you can get really, really stubborn. Well, this is working, or I'm doing this. Sometimes that can lead you into a place where you can really have to go through a lot to open your mind back up again. So it's super important to always keep it open. For anyone who's not following you, Emanuel, I hope this is open to a few people, to yourself and the way you train, and they can follow you. And I guess before you go, I would actually like to maybe ask you. I mean, Taylor was kind enough to recommend you. Is there someone that you would recommend that I speak to? Is there someone that you've trained with, or someone you train with, that you think would be a valuable guest that could offer more wisdom?
Like, if you're saying like that, for me, like I told you, and he got now a lot of attention recently because Jujimifu was, for example, there with him, and they did a training and stuff. But James Fuller, so strongman archaeology, if you want to learn a bit more about the history of strength sport and weight training, and different movements and how the body adapts and can adapt and can move, so he is definitely one recommendation which I would give you, and he would be, I think, glad to be on the podcast. And other than that, at the moment, to think, there are many, we are like in a bubble because we are like movement optimists, so we like to think, okay, the body is not fragile, the body adapts, like I said, and you don't have to be even with exercise selection, if you realize, or once you realize, okay, exercises are just arbitrary movements we took and put them and raised them on a standard, which are by default not anything which have to be held like that, because you can do any type of movement basically and load it. And I think Alex Sterner on Instagram, he is also someone who goes into this direction, and is, as far as I have seen, he also does a lot with like BJJ. So he's also combining strength with martial arts. So I think that's also interesting. So these two people, I could recommend you to take on your podcast.
Well, I appreciate the recommendation. I'll definitely look into those guys and follow them, and that's how it all starts. And once again, I just really want to appreciate you for your time today and coming on and being a guest, and I thank you for doing so. And I'm like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do in the future, Emanuel, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It was a really nice chat to talk about all these funny things, and I'm curious to see whom do you will have in future on your podcast, and I will give it a listen.
Thanks, man. Looking forward to seeing what happens. And I don't know what it's you. What time is it there for you? 3 o'clock?
It's 2.5.
2.5. Well, I mean, I will say to you then, enjoy your afternoon. It's 9 o'clock here, so the day's over. And we will talk again in the future.
Yes. Thank you.